But ladies and gentlemen, the situation demands, and this moment demands, that we do not leave Paris without an ambitious, inclusive, and durable global climate agreement. And after decades of work, half measures, and flawed attempts at galvanizing global action, we know, all of us, exactly what an effective agreement must include. First and foremost, we need an agreement that is as ambitious as possible. We don't lose anything for being ambitious. Today, we're formally announcing, the United States, that we are part of what we are calling the High Ambition Coalition. And this is a group of countries that is fully committed to ensuring that the agreement is a truly ambitious one. Addressing climate change will require a fundamental change in the way that we decide to power our planet. And our aim can be nothing less than a steady transformation of the global economy. And that's not a pipe dream. It is not some pie-in-the-sky idea that's sort of way out there and we're waiting for Godot to come along and give us the answer. That's not it. You know, this is not a situation where we have to hope and pray that some smart person is going to come along and find the solution. No, we already have the solution. That's part of what is so frustrating about this. The solution to climate change is energy policy. Sure, we're going to continue to pump gas and oil for years. We know that. But even nations whose economies depend largely on the production of oil are diversifying into renewable energy. And by the way, the United States, which is advocating this, is the world's largest gas and oil producer today. But an example of that transition is Dubai, which recently committed to establish a $27 billion fund to reach the Emirates' goal of installing solar panels on all buildings by 2030 and of retrofitting older buildings to become more energy efficient. We need to be sure that this agreement facilitates the energy policy choices that will enable the transformation that we need, but also recognizing the capabilities and capacities and needs of different nations. We also need an agreement that is flexible. Every country on earth has its own set of national circumstances to consider, its own politics, its own economy, its own capabilities. We respect that. And those factors are subject to change, obviously, from one year to another. That's why flexibility is so important in this agreement and why it must be enshrined within its four corners. Now, some people have criticized the idea of a nationally determined target. But let me tell you something. Having been at Kyoto and trying to pass it on the floor of the United States Senate and not being able to, we have learned the lessons of the past. The reason that so many countries are at the table now, the reason that nearly all nations, all but 10, have announced their own targets is precisely because this doesn't work. One size fits all. Because we have learned through the years that every country needs to take action based on its own assessments of its own capabilities, and those will change over time. So everyone does what they can coming out of Paris, but no one is forced to do more than is possible, and no one should be intimidated as a consequence of that, and there's no punishment, there's no penalty, but there has to be oversight. Now, we're all in this together as partners. And that fundamental concept is why this agreement will work and can work. But I emphasize that right to come to the table with your nationally determined reductions doesn't mean that a country signing on to this agreement can get away with doing nothing or next to nothing. The United States has long supported the notion of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities, with each of us doing the best we can. It's only fair to have higher expectations for developed countries and a sliding scale of ambition and approaches for everyone else. We recognize that. But in fairness to the citizens of the world, there is one thing this agreement has to ensure that all nations have in common. Remember, it's common, but differentiated responsibilities. This agreement, if we get the agreement we're trying to get, is filled with differentiation, because every country comes to the table with its own plan. That's differentiation. But we have to know that everybody is also being held to the same system of transparency about the progress they're making. Why? So that the lessons that are learned, so the technologies that are developed and created and implemented and deployed, and the reductions that are achieved can all be shared and then duplicated by others, so that people can build on that experience. And that helps us to ensure the best, most effective way forward. We can and we should also pursue different strategies for different, we can reach, each of us, for different goals. That's fine. But at the end of the day, we need to be accountable to one another and ultimately accountable to the next generation and the next after that. That means that we need to require regular reporting from all countries on what they're doing and how much progress they're making. And that's the only way we're going to know where we stand as a global community. And it's the only way also to give both the private and public sectors the confidence that the promises that we are making have actual weight behind them, and the confidence that we're all going to deliver. Remember, one of the things that really we expect to happen here and that makes Paris so important is not that we're going to leave here knowing that everything we do is going to hit the 2-degree mark, but what we're doing is sending the marketplace an extraordinary signal that those 186 countries are really committed. And that helps the private sector to move capital into that, knowing there's a future that is committed to this sustainable path. That is why we need a strong, legally binding transparency system. It is essential. Now, we also need an agreement that emphasizes adaptation and resilience. There are countries, we know, for which climate change is an existential threat today. For them, this isn't a matter of annexes or peak years. It's a matter of life and death. Yesterday, I met with leaders from the island states, the small island states, who expressed their legitimate concerns that the sea will swallow their nations. And the fact of the matter is that most of these countries have contributed nothing or next to nothing to the problem in the first place. And one of the hard realities that we're facing is that our collective delay now means that some of the impacts of climate change can't be reversed. Not my judgment, that's science again. Therefore, we have a moral responsibility to adapt and prepare for those impacts and enable the most vulnerable among us to be able to do the same. That means that we need to increase our efforts to mobilize climate finance from all possible sources, both public and private. Now, obviously, the world's largest economies, including the United States, need to play a major role in this regard. That's just common sense. And that's why the United States pledged $3 billion to the Green Climate Fund. It is why the United States already contributes more than $2.5 billion to climate finance annually, including more than $400 billion per year of grant-based resources for global climate adaptation. But we know that more is needed. So I am pleased to announce today that the United States is committing to double our public grant-based adaptation investments by the year 2020. And we are prepared to do our part, and we will not leave the most vulnerable nations among us to quite literally weather the storm alone. Now, protecting our future before it's too late is going to depend on whether all of us, every nation, is prepared to meet this moment.